connection with the research I was doing this morning, I came across also on the Mirror, that publication in the UK. This is one of their major newspapers over there. The true story of what happened to the boy that became the subject of the movie The Exorcist.
The 13-year-old boy seemed like a perfectly normal teenager. Attending school, concentrating on his studies, he was slightly built and unathletic, preferring to stay indoors, listening to his favorite programs on the radio and playing board games. Suddenly, witnesses say, a series of unexplained events began. Scratching sounds erupted from the walls and the floors of the family's home. The boy's bed would shake, furniture would slide across the room, and dresser drawers would fly open.
You might remember that movie came out in 1973. Pretty spooky movie.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Who once and for all consigned that fallen tyrant to the flames of hell, who sent your only begotten Son into the world to crush that roaring lion, hasten to our call for help, and snatch from ruination and from the clutches of the noonday devil this human being made in your image and likeness. Deviate!
Amen.
God, defender of the human race! Oh, look down in pity.
You killed your
on
mother.
This your servant.
You left her alone to die.
Shut
up! I'll never forgive you.
Oh, Lord,
Shut up!
devil's power.
Oh!
I command you, by the judge of the living and the dead, to depart from the servant of God. It's the power. Holy water. Oh! It's the power of Christ that compels you. The power of Christ 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 compels you.
I went to see it one night real late at night. I was just out of college at the time. Went to see it by myself, like a midnight showing. Came home to an empty apartment. Man, that was freaky. So it's a pretty scary movie, but it was based on a true story. Now, not everything that happened in the movie happened in real life, but it was based on the genuine story of a 13-year-old boy. And the author, William Peter Blatty, he was reading the Washington Post back in 1949, and he saw an article about this Maryland boy, and his name was Roland Doe, in the newspaper to protect his identity. And he was fascinated by the story, and so he wound up writing his novel, and they turned it into a movie. He was a 13-year-old boy. He was born to a German-American Protestant family. Everything was normal in his life until the summer of 1948, when he would have been about 12, when his aunt died.
First, his parents thought these strange occurrences were related to the boy's distress over the recent death of a favorite aunt. The aunt had schooled the boy in her beliefs about communicating with the dead. He had tried contacting her through a Ouija board.
And he started hearing weird scratching noises in the basement. He said that he saw an image of Jesus in his grandmother's room twist and move as if someone was hitting the wall behind it. At first, the family thought it was mice and called in pest control, but they weren't rodents. They saw Roland's mattress move violently in the middle of the night. There was a constant bashing coming from the basement. There was a smell of excrement flooding everything, and ordinary objects were suspended in the air. And a friend was over, and the boy was sitting in a chair, and then quickly, without any warning, he was thrown out of the chair and landed several feet away. So people not just in the family, but outside the family, had seen some of these incidents. He started having difficulty at school. The teachers were claiming that his desk would move during class as well as objects, and so he got tagged as a troublemaker. One of his fellow students said the desk was shaking and vibrating extremely fast, and I remember the teacher yelling at him to stop it, and I remember he kind of yelled back, "I'm not doing it." So the family, at their wits' end, he's getting ready to get expelled from school. He's labeled as a troublemaker, and he's just insisting, look, that wasn't me doing that. They turned to a Lutheran pastor of their German Protestant background, and he in turn recommended they contact a Catholic priest, because the Catholic priests back then, as today, have a lot more experience in dealing with demonic deliverances from demonic powers, than people in the Protestant.
Father Hughes, just 29 years old at the time, was unprepared to deal with the bizarre force that seemed to be inhabiting the boy.
He was certainly befuddled by all this in terms of, contemporary scientific input. But eventually he felt that, there was no option but that he was dealing with, satanic forces.
Father Hughes became convinced that exorcism, an arcane ritual requiring the approval of the Archbishop, was the answer.
The rite of exorcism was perfectly delineated, so his feeling was, well, I will follow this, and it should work.
The local priest was sent, but listen to this. See how much this sounds like the Gospels. The local priest was sent, but Roland, or actually the demon in him, screamed out at the priest, "O priest of Christ, you know that I am the devil." So that's how the first encounter began. So they did exams, and what the Roman Catholic Church does is they require mental and physical evaluations before they will conduct an exorcism to rule out physical explanations, to rule out psychological or psychiatric explanations. So they took the boy to Georgetown University Hospital, which is a Jesuit-run institution.
The parents checked the boy into Washington's Georgetown University Hospital. He was strapped to the bed. Father Hughes blessed the child, knelt at the bedside, and the ritual began. Calling on God, he commanded that the boy be delivered from evil.
There are some rumors that the priests had to wear rubber clothing under their cassocks because the boy would continue to urinate on them as they were trying to help him. Now, the first effort they made to exorcise him, he broke free of his restraints and slashed one of the priests with a bed spring on the arm, which wound up maiming him for life.
And the boy broke the strap and pulled out a spring and gashed Father Hughes's arm from the top to the wrist.
Hughes, traumatized both physically and mentally, abandoned the exorcism.
The records indicate that there were scratches on the boy's body for about 4 successive nights. After the 4th night, words were written in printed form. These letters were clear, but seemed to have been scratched on the body by claws. After 5 days, he had been brought to the hospital. He was sent back home. So public records showed that he stayed at the hospital under his real name. They know his real name. Once again, now they're at their wits' end. They do not know what to do. I mean, he's slashing priests with bed springs and maiming them for life. So they decided that they were going to have him baptized. So they're driving on the way to church to have him baptized. But he turned on his uncle who was driving the car and swore at him in profanity and again threatened him if you go through with this. Roland thrashed about as the priest tried to carry out the relatively short service. When he was asked, "Do you renounce the devil and all his works?" which is one of the things that you do in a baptism. I would do this in baptisms at the church I pastor. That's one of the things I would ask them to do. Do you renounce the devil and all his works? Before I would have them affirm their faith in Jesus Christ. He went into a rage when he was asked to do that and had to be restrained. So they didn't get anywhere here. They moved the family. The family moved to St. Louis from Maryland, which is where they had been. And whatever was possessing him seemed to agree as the word Louis appeared on his rib cage. despite his mother saying he'd been under constant supervision and no one had seen him do it. So the strange goings-on continued in their new home. And somebody finally, to get at the truth, someone finally found a diary that was kept by these priests at the hospital where he experienced his deliverance. The St. Louis hospital where he'd stayed was demolished in 1978, and they found this diary, and it was the work of one of the priests who had helped with the exorcism. The document went into detail about those 4 nights when the priest tried to set him free. Father William Bodern was the lead priest in all of this. When he read the rite from the materials prepared by the church, he had a stronger priest, a former football player, Father Halloran, had to restrain the boy as he writhed and shouted at them. That reminds you of the guy in the tombs. Nobody could restrain him. He kept breaking the chains. There's kind of a supernatural energy that these demons can impart. There was blotched writing in what appeared to be blood on his skin. He was branded 30 times all over his body with the words hell and hello. He cursed and screamed obscenities in a voice that ranged from deep bass to falsetto. Other things happened. Finally, the last night, things finally came to a head. Father Bodern covered Roland in holy metals and a crucifix. He exploded in a rage and was detained by 5 people. Father Bodern demanded the spirit identify itself. Roland replied, I am Satan. My name is Spite. The priest commanded him to leave his body, and he did. About things coming to a head on April 18 of this particular year, this was in 1949, the father demanded that the spirit identify itself. Remember, Jesus did that with the guy that had the legion of demons. The demons wouldn't come out, they wouldn't come out, they wouldn't come out. Finally, Jesus demanded that the head demon tell him his name.
What is your name?
Legion.
Said, my name is Legion, for we are many. Legion in Roman army was a unit of 6,000 soldiers. There were a lot of demons inside this guy, and Christ demanded that he divulge his name, and he did. This demon said his name was Spite.
Ritual explicitly prohibits dialogue with the demon, but directs the exorcist to demand answers to 2 questions. What is your name? And what is the day and hour you will depart?
So you ask those, and then you pause for an answer. Sometimes an answer is given. Like one time the child responded Legion to what is your name.
At other times, the boy, speaking in an unfamiliar voice, identified himself as Spite, or the devil.
So you wonder if somehow that was part of the doorway, had something to do with the doorway that was opened into this young boy's life, even at an early age. Might have been some kind of spiteful attitude that he carried around, actions that he had taken that had opened his life up to the entrance of demonic spirits. So once the man, the clergyman doing the deliverance, the demon identified himself by name. He said, I command you to leave this body now. Roland's body apparently went into a violent spasm. Remember, that's what happened in Mark 1. When Jesus is in the synagogue, the demonized guy cries out in a loud voice. Christ commands him to come out, and his body convulsed in an enormous spasm, and then went still. That happened apparently this night.
Suddenly, according to Halloran, the boy struggled and his body contorted wildly.
The child became very violent, and there was a huge noise, an explosion or report, and a very, very bright light in the sanctuary of the church. Then that disappeared.
Suddenly the boy was still, a smile on his face. He simply said, he's gone. Some accounts claim the word exit appeared on his body only to disappear soon after it was over. After he was released, the strange going-ons stopped, and he went on to live a normal life. He claims to remember nothing of what went on, had to rely on people who observed it and were eyewitnesses. The reason that his exorcism has gained some traction is the sheer number of people, like the priests, plural, the doctors, the nurses, that witnessed the behavior in and around him. Priests, students, family and friends, nurses and staff all observed some of these things. But he became a normal boy after he was released from this demonic oppression. Later he wrote the priest who had set him free, thanking him, mentioning his new dog and his normal life. So he wound up clothed and in his right mind.
And the demons went out of the man and into the pigs.
I'll follow you wherever you go. Let me come with you.
Go back home and tell what God has done for you.
My recommendation, if you got one of those, anybody listen to me now, you got a dream catcher web, any of that stuff, any occult objects, get rid of those things. That's what happens. Remember in Acts, in Ephesus, they brought all their occult books, they brought all their stuff, and they burned them in a big giant bonfire in the middle of the city of Ephesus. I would urge you to do the same thing.
A number who had practiced sorcery brought their scrolls together and burned them publicly. When they calculated the value of the scrolls, the total came to 50,000 drachmas. In this way, the word of the Lord spread widely and grew in power.
I want to be sure that we're clear about this. I'm not saying, because every time I bring this up or talk about this, people accuse me of saying this. I am not saying, most pointedly and most emphatically, I am not saying that there is a demon behind every bush. What I am saying is that there are demons behind some bushes. You know, Jesus didn't believe there was a demon behind every bush. There were some people that were just physically ill. When they were physically ill, he didn't rebuke demons. He touched them and healed them and raised them up. Where the problem was spiritual in nature, where there were demonic spirits that were harassing people or oppressing them or holding them in bondage, then he would rebuke them in his powerful name.
Our God, a firm foundation, our rock, the only solid ground. As nations rise and fall,